I would call the May 8th Riverton City Council work session to order. And could I have Tim lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, and I will lead in the invocation.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our dearest Heavenly Father, thank you for the many blessings that we have, the ability we have to live in this wonderful city, in this wonderful state of Wyoming. Please bless us in all that we do tonight, and that we can make the decisions that are best for the city of Riverton and its citizens. Please pour out your protection upon all of the people that are in the military and law enforcement as they protect us and protect our liberties. And we ask all of these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
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 Roll call.
Yes, Your Honor. Councilman Lance Godey.
Here.
Councilman Tim Hancock.
Here.
Councilman Kyle Larson.
Here.
Councilwoman Holly Gibbon. Here. Mayor Pro Tem Mike Bailey.
Here. Okay, we do have a quorum. I would entertain a motion to excuse Mayor Baker from tonight's meeting.
And
Mike.
Mr. Peterson.
I move we excuse Councilman Sean Peterson and the Mayor Lars Baker from tonight's meeting.
Second.
Oh, Mike, move your mic.
Okay. Need to get a little more spread out here. Okay. I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as written.
Do we want to vote on
We
the?
still need to
Or,
vote on
I
it.
guess we got to vote on the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Now I'm looking for a motion to approve the agenda as written.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, then the next thing up is our personnel policy revision discussion. City Administrator.
Thank you, Your Honor. The governing body of the City of Riverton originally approved the city personnel manual in '92. In 2016, there was a significant revision to it. Since coming here a little over 6 months ago, we've been working on this for a couple of those months. HR Director Kristen Watson has done a significant amount of work to the document that you have been provided and has prepared the summary sheets. Unfortunately, Kristen could not be with us this evening, so I will do my best to stand in her place and go over some of these items. Communities periodically go through the process of a significant review of the personnel manual. I am pleased to tell you that after a review of this personnel manual with the HR director, the amount of changes that are necessary are comparatively few. There are a number of items that we needed to clarify. There are some better verbiage that has been developed over time that we needed to use, and there were some items that we needed to bring into line with our practices and best practices in general. As such, we've done that, and it has been presented to you. The document that you have has three different color of print in it. Anything that was black was there before and remains there. Anything that was red is new, and anything that is blue is something that got moved. You'll notice as I go through the summary briefly that there will be areas that are combined, so you'll see red, blue, and black all together for good reason. I understand that this is a significant document. Obviously, it's quite large. And as such, we wanted to have this work session to begin to introduce you to it prior to its introduction in a week. So you had a little bit of time with it to date, and if we have anything that comes up and any input from council, that is something we could include and consider as part of the final presentation for adoption. In order to just try to get through it, I'm going to try to hit the highlights in the main sections. If you would turn to the proposed FY 18-19 personnel manual changes dated May 4th, of 2018. It is a summary sheet, looks like this. We're just going to go through that, and if there are any questions as we go, please feel free to ask them, or wait till the end, and I will be happy to answer those as best as I can. I would point out on the, just some items to look forward to on the onset. There are changes in leave benefit accruals, merit increases changing to the fiscal year, and travel reimbursement policies. Those are some of the more significant ones that aren't just housekeeping. A great deal of this document is housekeeping. You'll see a number of references changed to the clerk/HR director as opposed to finance director. We have removed the one section where the mayor is taking care of some discipline. That's just erased. So some of that just to bring it up to speed. With that, if there are no immediate questions, I can get into the introduction. Most of this is, as I denoted, the changes in the clerk, HR director, finance directors, the changing of names, and housekeeping. Section 1 deals with employment practices. Recruitment and job announcements. The main change here is that it allows more flexibility in the advertising. The way that advertising had been handled before had more to do with a traditional approach of, okay, go put it in the paper. And that practice had continued and continued and continued. Most of our items are posted online. We can note them on Facebook. So social media, and so the changes in this policy allow us greater latitude in how we determine or where best to put the advertisement. As we pay for advertisement, it's important to know we want to minimize costs but maximize the exposure. So that's a conversation that's ongoing, but these changes take that into account. 1.03 denotes accounts for future acceptance of electronic submissions. Again, generally a housekeeping item and bringing it up to speed. 04 is eligibility and selection, deals with applicant tracking form as opposed to sending the application itself around. There's information on there that we don't always want out. Employment categories are combined. It's a housekeeping item. Before you had 4 categories, now you're going to have 3. We combined the appointed and contract duties because they were mirroring each other largely. 1.08 is employee identification card. It's pretty self-explanatory. 110 with personnel records. This section largely deals with employment inquiries. One of the challenges that we have is when employers or potential employers, people call and say they want information on an employee, we have to be very careful with that information. So this denotes the policy. It denotes the way in which information may be released and the policy of the city as to what we say in those situations when they ask. So we wanted to be very clear about that. So moving down the road, if anybody has to read that when myself or Kristen aren't available, then that's pretty clear. It was important. The probationary period in 111 is discussed as a year long. That is changed to introductory, so there is a verbiage change, but you also have the 1 year introductory, period. Police department is 18 months. The reason the police department is 18 months is because a fair amount of that time is spent at the academy. And while there are reviews done at the academy, the intent is to have our staff review them for a year. So theirs is a little longer. There is the ability at different parts that those periods of time can be modified. You'll notice that there are caveats where the administrator can say, somebody's been here and has done it before and they had to go to our academy or something, and obviously they're good to go, then we can have that conversation. So there is some flexibility in this one. Section 2 and Section 3 are combined. We do like shortening the document and combining those sections when we can. There was just a lot of duplication in these sections, so the categories have been combined. So classification and compensation plan have been combined. 202 is the salary schedule to inclusive, discusses the progression. The main change here that I would denote to you is that the pay increases are proposed to begin in July 1, once adopted. We have had a significant number of conversations when we went with our goals, when we talked about our annual reporting, when we talked about, all of our audit and the like. All of this reporting is done on a July 1 basis. We would like to move as many items to that single date as we can. This does not mean in this situation that the review is done right before July 1. It means that pay increases happen in July 1. This also allows us, and that is if budget allows. So, sir?
So are you talking about merit and COLA and advancements all taking effect on July 1?
Your Honor, we are talking about merits and COLAs. Any additional compensation would take effect at that time. That is the proposal. The reason is that I should back up. Reviews will happen throughout the year. We have to know, looking at the budget, what we can and can't do. Can we give cost of living adjustments and step increases, or merits, if you will? Or can we only do merits, or can we only do cost of living? And at that time, we would always find that in July 1. In order to calculate that number more efficiently and to make sure that we're looking forward to the financial help, we felt that it was a more appropriate time to just do all of them at once. So say yours is in April, your review is in April. You go through your review, we're recommending you for any raise that you would be allowed. Those are going to take effect July 1. And then that would begin putting everybody on the same level. Everybody at the same date, I'm sorry.
I understand. But I guess we've had discussions how, if I'm in April, that's not too bad a deal because July 1's only a couple of 3 months away. But if my anniversary date falls in August, then that puts me 11 months away.
Your Honor, you're absolutely, you're correct. The change, this is the overall long-term personnel policy. So the change, that compensation, how we would get through that initial time period where, okay, as of July 1, you might have been here and this person might have been here. What you do that first year would have to be unique. And we would have to make an exception to the policy at that point. But on an ongoing basis, we would seek to try to get that. So the word I'm trying to come up with, I think, is, or the term is, that we're not hurting anybody in particular or saying, okay, well, you're just going to have to deal with it. What we're trying to say is if we have to adjust slightly or prorate something in the first year, that would be something we would do. That would be something we would propose.
Kyle?
Let's take an example of yourself. That's what Mike is talking about. You came in the first part of the year, and yet our review won't happen until July 1. So does that mean in February of next year, that'll be 1 year, then we wait till July 1 to do any compensation?
Your Honor, yes.
Cool.
Essentially, when this fully takes effect, you would have that amount, you would have your review at a different time during the year than your actual compensation, whereas right now, we're doing a review, it goes up the chain, and then it is proposed for the increase.
So for the first time, everybody's going to suffer a 12-month period. Then from that period to July 1 would be even up. And then after that, it would be July 1 for compensation.
Your Honor, Councilman, yes. This first year, we would have to determine based on the budget and what we propose, what we would do beginning July 1, because that first year is a little different. We're going through that changeover, if I'm answering your question right.
You are.
And then after that, once we've said, okay, this kind of gets everybody even, or this is the fair way to do it, after that, it's July 1. If you have the scenario where there's no merits and no COLAs, then it becomes a moot point.
Right.
Because as of July 1, you just don't have it.
And I guess I totally understand, in a planning aspect, that makes a ton of sense. The challenge becomes that guy that hires on in August, he's got to wait 23 months for his raise. Because he wouldn't be due by July 1 the first year, because he started in August. So he ends up waiting 23 months to get that advancement if it's coming. And again, if we're in budgetary times where there isn't any, then it doesn't really matter. But it's going to be a little bit of a stickling point and people figuring out, and I guess people are going to have the tendency to think that they're getting taken advantage of.
Your Honor.
I don't know the answer to the question, to the solution, but.
And
I have one.
we don't. Oh.
But go ahead, you go ahead.
Tim.
I was going to say, I mean, if you were going to do an increase anyway, that doesn't necessarily mean that you would just be doing a one-year increase for someone at 23 months anyway. If there were merit increases approved at that point, and number one, merit increases are not a guarantee. I mean, that is subject to budget analysis every single year. So I think that's the first thing to realize. This isn't an automatic thing by any stretch of the imagination for anybody. And then number two, I think if somebody has shown that kind of quality of work that we would want to encourage, that doesn't necessarily mean that there has to be, we can be flexible with the amount of the merit increase in that kind of situation, I would think. You might have to wait a little longer, but
Right.
I think this, and I don't think this is even saying that this is going to apply every single case, every single time. We're just saying this is what it is. If there were going to be exceptions, then they'd have to be approved, would be part of the thought, I would think. I don't know.
Your Honor, yes, we can make exceptions. There are ways to make exceptions in terms of compensation if someone goes up, gets a certification or the like. So we try to plan for that as much as possible, but ultimately we are restricted by whatever the budgetary allowance, whatever our budget is for that year.
Okay,
Your Honor.
yes.
So just to clarify, and I was trying to find it in the table of contents instead of getting lost in the body of the document, but are performance evaluations done consistent with their hiring date or some sort of odd individualized process? Like you're not doing, like if all evaluations are done in April or March through May or some sort of narrow period of time, and then if available, increases are July instead of the August example. Like I totally understand what Mike is saying, but like at the college, we do all our evaluations at the same time. So everybody's on the same playing field to know that if raises, merit raises, all the things that are potential could happen, they will happen effective July 1, because we're all being evaluated at the same time, as opposed to throughout the year. So some people who are getting evaluated early in the year are having to wait 11 months for their raise, versus a person who got evaluated a month before the raise, and they don't have to wait a month. So why wouldn't we just evaluate everybody shortly before potential raises would go into effect? It's a rhetorical question. You don't have to give me an answer, but that would be a solution to the problem of having to wait 11 months for a raise, because everybody would wait 2 months or 3 maybe.
Mm-hmm. Your Honor, Councilman, I agree. One of the only challenges that evaluating everybody in a short period of time is we have in excess of 100 employees, and sometimes that can be a little challenging. Now, you have a number of employees at the college, too.
We have 300, and they're all done in a 2-month period.
It is.
So it's definitely doable, and that includes faculty as well as staff. So it's not easy, trust me. As a supervisor, it is not easy, but you're spreading them out amongst middle management as well as upper management. So and if you break it up into, even if it starts in February and goes through May or something, so that it coincides with the budget cycle, so that all evaluations are completed by the time the budget cycle is finalizing, and it all kind of matches up, because that's what we do, and it seems to work pretty well.
We absolutely can do that. What I think I was trying to get at was more so that's why it hasn't happened, I think, a lot in the past. We absolutely can. I think the concern, and if I'm hearing Mayor Pro Tem Bailey's concern, is that we still have people that have in the past been given a raise at a certain time. And I don't disagree. Evaluating in April would solve some of that going on in the future, and we will discuss it and try to bring something forward for discussion. But we're trying to figure out that first year as well of how we do that first year of.
Well, out of all negative things, something positive comes. This will be a very good year to make that adjustment.
It will. It will. And we appreciate the feedback. It'll give us something to bring back that is a little more analyzed when we actually bring this to you. If we can't fully analyze it and give you a good answers to what you've brought up here tonight, we won't be at the next council meeting. We want to make sure we're not bringing this back a week later, go, well, we thought we had it right, and redo it again.
And I think Lance's idea, takes some of that sting, if you want to call it, out of there, to where, oh, I'm going to do a employee evaluation in August, but you'll see a raise next July, where at least everybody would get evaluated in that last few months of the year, or however you end up laying it out. And then everybody just knows, okay, it goes in effect in July, and everybody's going to wait. Everybody's going to be in the same boat, as opposed to the guy that hired in August gets sort of treated worse than the guy that get hired in April.
So we will.
They aren't really a 12-month review, it's an annual review.
Okay.
Tim?
And the other thing that I think this does is when you're having to evaluate people, for all that, sometimes we try to say you're only competing with yourself. The reality is when we've only got a limited amount of money, you want to make sure the person that really is the most appropriate person for it. And so if you think about it, it is going to be something where you're going to have to be able to compare employees' efforts to other employees. And that's difficult if you're doing one in April and then another one in November, when the one in April maybe hasn't been putting the effort in November, and the one in November stops putting effort in April. I mean, it makes it a lot easier to have all of those at the same time. I would think if this is a change that we're wanting to make, I think the other change would make sense too. It would be a good time to make both changes rather than doing one and having it staggered. I think it makes sense to say, okay, everything's going to be happening in July now, and with the employee evaluations, annual evaluations in April or something.
And to add, since we're discussing it, I think that would actually give us the ability to budget more precisely, simply because exactly here's who made the cut this year.
Yep.
And so I think that we'll bring something forward for that. Thank you. I'm on to the second page on section 4, work week declaration. There was some clarity. We had some redundant language. It's another housekeeping item. Section 4.04 deals with on-call duty pay. There's some just slight changes there. Wasn't anything too significant, I don't think. And current practices in 4.06 deal with direct deposit. Again, not quite a cleanup, but it's something that we do use, so it does line up with our existing practices. Section 407 was brought about due to some challenges that we've had just over time. Sometimes things happen. Somebody's not here. They can't approve a time card. Something went wrong. We use a computer system to do that. We need ways to change that in a method that everybody understands and that is clear. That's what's been done there. Section 4.08 is a minor change, but it does give definition to the point at which an individual is considered to have resigned. As it previously read, if you don't show up once, you don't work here. You've resigned. There's a lot of different things that can happen in a one-day period. So we have extended that to 2 days, 2 consecutive days. One of the questions that came up previously was, well, what if they do 1 day here and 1 day here and 1 day over here and they're not consecutive? Well, if they're doing it more than once, then that's a disciplinary item. It gets handled through our disciplinary procedures, so it's not really a challenge. So we're recommending that we loosen that from the you don't show up 1 day to if you don't show up 2 consecutive days.
Tim?
I just would note, this actually is saying it's got to be 3, because it says for more than 2 consecutive days. I would think for more than 2 consecutive days. I would think 2 is enough.
Yeah.
I don't think we need to say 3.
Yeah, you don't want more
I
than
would-
you want 2.
I would suggest we just say without notice for 2 or more consecutive days would make sense. I read that earlier, and I'm
Okay.
wondering that myself. I mean, I don't think we need to wait until 3 days with somebody not telling us what's going on to say, hey, okay, you're done.
We can make that, no, we will make that change. 4.13A and B deals with controlled substance and alcohol, specifically language to define post-accident testing protocols. It's just an ongoing item that is relatively consistent for us to discuss or to deal with is, okay, if there's an accident, how do you need to report it? If there's, alcohol and drug testing needs to be involved. That's something that's pretty consistent, again, trying to be clear.
Tony?
Sir.
So what is the city of Riverton's drug testing policy?
Let me get back to the page, sir. 1 second, please.
29.
We do have we currently have a pre-employment testing policy with prospective drivers for controlled substances. We also have we look into violations on DOT rules pertaining to controlled substance and or alcohol use within the last 2 years. We have a post-accident testing section, which is what is partially modified here. And then we also have a random testing. So we have different testing policies. Maybe I'm not answering the question.
I understand, okay, so if they're a CDL, DOT regulated position, they would fall under the DOT drug testing policy.
That is,
How about non-DOT? So it's just post-accident?
I think I can help with that, Mr. Bailey.
okay.
And I didn't go digging in to see what it said. but-
Yeah, and I was seeking clarification.
problem.
If you have with anything other than a CDL, it's post-accident
Okay.
testing policy. And then we do have the randoms that happen per the random testing policy. And we also have reasonable suspicion policy that if an individual if there's reasonable suspicion, they could be asked to go and take part in a test.
Okay, so then basically the difference between a DOT CDL driver and a regular employee is they wouldn't have the pre-employment.
There's pre-employment.
They still have pre-employment, I'm sorry, yes.
Okay. Good, thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to section 4.17, which is privileged information. We deal with a fair amount of information here that isn't always public information. You can have human resources information, legal information, et cetera. So we wanted to have something in writing that actually denoted who releases items, and if there's any question, who that can be deferred to. And we would expect, and we wrote that section in with the idea that most of the items that are in question would be deferred over to the HR director or myself, and per our policy. It allows us to be consistent. Some items are pretty easy. Some items, if we ask a question, we have to have some direction. 418, the big one
Jim, hold on a second.
sorry.
I'm sorry. I read a lot of this for one because there's things that I had in mind as I was reading it that just, the first thing I would note is 4.14. I would actually propose a change there. In the third paragraph, no employee shall hold the office of mayor or city councilman. Any employee desiring to hold office shall resign from city employment upon election. Now, this is well and good. I think it makes sense, but here's the one thing I want to bring up, and maybe even Chief Murphy has thought of what I'm going to bring up, and that is Scott Peters is not mayor or city councilman in Riverton. He is the mayor of Shoshone. By the way this is worded, he would be in violation of the policy. Now, clearly, the policy is geared towards someone who is a Riverton city councilman or mayor. But I think if we're going to be making changes, we might as well look into that so we're not inadvertently having Scott Peters be in violation of our policy.
Your Honor, good idea. We missed that one. Thank you.
And then in 4.18, this is maybe something that's not as important, but I wanted to bring it up. When it talks about sexual harassment, it's 4.18. Third paragraph. We added sexual harassment there. I thought that was great. Makes a lot of sense to do that. But in the fourth paragraph, it says, we took out the language, special attention should be paid to the prohibition of sexual harassment. Now, I can see maybe why we would take that out because we're saying all harassment is important. But I guess in my opinion, when you're talking about harassment and everything like that, I would suggest that maybe we could keep that sentence in, but I don't know if anybody else feels that way. It just seemed strange to me to take that out. I think it was placed in there because we didn't list sexual harassment specifically in the list above, and so it was a way to kind of throw in sexual harassment there. But at the same time, I think even though we added that in the list above, I don't feel there's any need to take that out. I still think that it makes a lot of sense to make clear to all of our staff that when it comes to sexual harassment, that's something that we take seriously. And I would suggest we could keep that sentence in there.
Your Honor, there's no, Councilman Hancock is absolutely correct, and the reasoning why it was moved is because previously the other one, the previous list didn't denote it appropriately. So we can absolutely leave that there. It does no harm at all.
Okay.
I'll start talking less now.
We appreciate the input. Thank you.
Very diplomatic.
Just, Your Honor, I just want to play the devil's advocate just for a moment. And what else should we pay special attention to? So, I mean, I don't disagree with the point, but it brings the point that, is there something else we should pay special attention to besides sexual harassment? So, and again, rhetorical question, I'm just kind of throwing it out there, that I don't have a problem with it staying, but it does raise the question about if we're paying special attention to that, is there something else that we should be paying attention to? Or should we give special attention to everything? I guess is the ultimate statement I would have, is that we don't need to give special attention to that. We should be paying special attention to all of it.
All forms of harassment should have the same amount of attention, not one over the other.
That would be my, and I don't know exactly how you word that, other than it being very clearly added, that sexual harassment was added to the fourth paragraph, or third paragraph, or to emphasize in a different way, so that it's.
Your Honor, if I could make a comment to help the discussion. The two items that we see most in HR are sexual harassment and bullying. So those are your two major forms of harassment. So generally speaking, you could call attention to one or two different items. In this case, we denote harassment of race, national origin, religion, disability, pregnancy, age, military status, or sex, or any other conduct that is considered offensive or harassing. So in this case, we do cover everything. In terms of actual implementation of this document, I don't know how much calling special attention to any one of those changes our requirement to treat all of them with the severity that they require. So leaving the sentence says, hey, let's pay attention to this a little bit. It's more of a it's more of a focal point. So it doesn't hurt to stay.
Tony,
Sorry.
did we consult with legal counsel on this section or check with maybe an HR-specific attorney? Because I think this boilerplate language that I assume that we came up with on our own, we maybe ought to make sure that it meets all the new specifications, because that's a sort of a constantly changing kind of a thing.
Your Honor, we have already passed this document through LGLP as it is currently written. However, I think it's a good point, and I think we can ask this question further to make sure that we can give a very detailed explanation of the appropriate way to provide that. That was the purpose of our meeting tonight, so.
Right.
Yeah, but I guess to me, I would have to agree that I don't think we want to draw special attention to any specific form of harassment, that they all are equally enforceable, or whatever the term would
Right,
be.
not tolerated,
Not, yeah, intolerable.
yes.
And I guess to me, and I hate to just wordsmith this to death, but other conduct that considered offensive, that's pretty broad.
Your Honor, one of the other, just for the sake of discussion and consideration as we go on and find, I understand that what we're looking for is maybe some better verbiage. And that's what we will take this back and work on this with. One of the phrases that has become popular that I've used before when dealing with these types of items is other non-merit based, you say non-merit based factors. So when we do evaluations and the like, that's one of the that's some of the current phrasing, but we will have this, we'll bring this back with something either different or a very good explanation of why it exists the way it is.
Okay.
Great.
I believe we were at section 4.18. 4.18, one of the major changes being the mayor taking disciplinary action. We've had this conversation before in previous items, so this is going to be modified. Making sure I'm in the right section again. 4.20 is deals with accidents, as we talked about with the drug testing policy. This discusses how employees should handle accidents. We attempted to be very clear with this one, so you're going to see a lot more in terms of changes in this section. So I would, while I understand it's a lot to digest, the attempt here was to be very clear in any situation, if there's property damage, somebody gets hurt or anything, how we move forward. Little fender benders, sometimes people have a tendency, or have in the past, in different situations, have the tendency to say, well, it's, I just barely scraped it, and all of a sudden we get a claim and we don't know what's happening and why didn't you report it? So we wanted to be more clear here.
Your Honor. Tony, I'm curious if this wording is like being recommended through our risk management process, or is it a boilerplate out of HR manuals, or like, just curious if we're covering, based on your assessment, which I totally agree with, in lowering risk.
I believe this one comes directly from our safety policy, and that is developed with a great deal of assistance, including LGLP and the like. This language here, I do not believe is inherently boilerplate, but it does have, it's probably going to be more common.
Okay.
Yeah, I would want to make sure that you look at your drug testing policy, because the post-accident piece would need to tie directly to this too.
We'll make a note to double check. Thank you. Moving on to section 5, disciplinary action, and section 6, employee grievances. Oddly enough, this is one of the ones that becomes the most used, simply because anything that happens with involving disciplinary action and the back and forth that oftentimes happens with either a grievance or an appeal happens, and we come to this section probably more than anything. So we've attempted to make this more clear than it was before. There are some significant changes in terms of some cleanup in number of days and the time frame that is allowed for appeals, for grievances, and the like. Section 2 is return to probationary status, has a significant amount of detail simply because it denotes very clearly, I believe, if an individual is returned to probationary status, what that means, how, when they are brought back from probationary status, how they're treated in terms of pay and the like. So this section has been worked over and read probably more than any other. Our grievance process is also modified. You can see by the amount of red that's sitting there. Essentially, with our grievance processes, if an individual is not comfortable or not accepting of the action taken, they have the ability to go, of course, to their direct supervisor, their division manager, department head, city administrator. In all cases, that process, whether it be in the police department or any other department, remains the same. So that's been clarified a little bit, and how we should respond to that is also clarified. I would, the only thing I guess I would request, this is one of the items we always want a lot of eyes on, because it's the most used. So not only tonight, but as we move forward and consider this, if anybody sees any items here or in any other section, we would appreciate just let us know so we can kind of consider that. Just as we talked about salary, going to salaries and wage increases, et cetera, moving towards a fiscal year date, leave benefits would largely go the same way. Keeping in mind the way this is provided, and I wish Kristen was here, she could walk you through it a lot better than I can, but the idea is not to take anything from anybody or to shorten them in that first year. So in those situations, we would be moving it in a manner that is to their benefit, and that's a tough first year item sometimes, but if they carry a little bit more leave for a short amount of time, that's not that big a deal to us. We want our people to use their leave. It's a quality of life item. So we would detail that a little bit more at the final presentation, but if there are any questions on that now or later, we'd like to hear those, just as we want to hear the input about how we change anniversary dates and the like.
Mike,
Kyle.
one question, I'm just, sorry to go back. It's on, it's above 4.05, it's dismissal. And I noticed that at the front we had, instead of termination, we had separation. And here we've got termination for infraction of, and we've got all kinds of terms that we have ripped out of the front part, yet they're still in the body. Instead of dismissal, it should have been separation, and termination should be separation, and infractions for severe natures of repeated infractions following earlier disciplinary actions. All of that needs to be reworked.
For consistency in verbiage?
I thought that's what this exercise was about, was consistency.
Your Honor, Councilman, you are correct. Thank you. We will go through and we will, that's going to be, we can do that with the find and find.
Oh,
And
just go into the word and.
But, and we do appreciate that. If there are other sections here that we see that, we're always looking at our own particular sections of the one we're concentrating on, so that's appreciated.
Well, we haven't had a lot of this. We've had, what, 4 years? We've had 2, maybe 3 situations. It's not like, you know, you're hiring gorillas and we can't teach them to play the piano and so we get rid of them. But I realize we want a good document. And fortunately, you always go to the document to determine what are we going to do? And if it's predetermined, then it's equitable.
Your Honor, before you move on, there was one that we went by, and I don't think it was on the summary list, maybe, but 4.21, the smoking policy. Smoking is prohibited.
What page is on?
What's that?
Page.
47.
47.
Thank you. I'm jumping back and forth a little.
Sure, I had the same
Smoking
thing.
policy.
So I just wanted to kind of clarify that it doesn't specify while working. It says inside all facilities and vehicles. That's it. So the way I read that would be is that employees can smoke while working. Because it doesn't say you can't. I mean, it's telling you where you can't. It's prohibited. So, and do we define facilities as all property, city property? I mean, I'm not sure if the definition exists that. So I wanted a clarification there that whether there's an opportunity to clarify that is that can city employees smoke while working, and then, yeah. And then whether or not we need to clarify where they also are still prohibited from smoking.
Your Honor, I believe that we had a very short conversation about this. I believe the intent when we're writing it is to say, don't do it in the buildings, don't do it in the cars. But if you're out in the yard, out down at Public Works and out in the yard, and it's not a safety hazard, of course, then yes, if you want to smoke, by all means smoke. The conversation, if we want to say all of our facilities are completely smoke-free, being all the grounds whatsoever during the workday, okay, we're completely open to the conversation. But right now, the way it's written, and I think the intent was to say, don't smoke in the buildings, don't smoke in the vehicles.
I would agree that facilities is probably too broad because technically inside the fence down at Public Works could be considered inside the facility. We probably need to say buildings and vehicles.
And property.
If that's what we want to do.
I mean, I guess we just need to say what we mean, not giving latitude for individual interpretation. If I do have some problems with employees smoking while they work.
Okay.
So I don't know that we need to outright put it in policy, but we probably do in order to justify telling someone they can't. So just like drinking while they drive, I mean, we tell them you can't do that for a very specific purpose, so.
Tim?
I guess the only thing I would say on that is we have to be careful because, I mean, we're not suggesting that in order to become a City of Riverton employee, you have to quit smoking. I think having a place where they can, I mean, if we say, for example, property, then that would mean that they can't smoke in the yard or whatever, you know, in city property, or they couldn't smoke in city park, or, I mean, I think if we're wanting to just do buildings and vehicles, just saying buildings and vehicles would work just fine.
I'm not convinced of that, but I mean, I totally see what you're, I think the goal is not to be smoke-free everywhere in the city, but working while they're smoking, I have a problem with. And that doesn't mean we need to spend money to build designated smoking areas where they can smoke while they're on a break either. We've struggled with this at the college, the hospital has struggled with it over the years. Any larger entity struggles with this, but, yeah. Enough said.
So, Tony, do we have a specific, like, break policy? Because, again, that's where, and I would agree, we all have similar issues in our dealings with our employees.
Yeah.
Is how do you designate that they're able to smoke when they want to take a break and smoke, but yet the guy can't take 17 smoke breaks in an 8-hour day? Because that, as long as he went outside, he wouldn't be breaking a policy. And again, you always, unfortunately, we have to all write policy for the 1% that screws it up for everybody else. But I guess, to me, I think we need to maybe add a little to that, if that's what you were wanting to do, is that X amount of breaks, and you have to smoke outside, which is, I think, what we want to do, which is not smoking inside the buildings or the vehicles.
Your Honor, let us give it some thought and some clarity, so when we bring it back, we can have I think you're correct. Saying facilities says, okay, it's the facility, the yard, and the building, or just the building. My reading of it and the intent was obviously not what everybody else is reading, so that's a good reason to change it. If we were, just speaking generally, if we were to look into a smoking policy, and we were going to say, okay, you can't do it while you're working, say, then it would be in our best interest to designate smoking areas, and then, okay, you get X number of breaks based on your 8-hour, it was what, 2 15-minute breaks per 8-hour day.
Yeah.
And then you can use that time to smoke if you want to.
And a lot of that's dependent upon whether they're exempt or non-exempt as to whether they get breaks. I mean, so there's I know there's some weird nuances to that. I want to raise it as an issue. If it becomes a financial issue, because now we're having to be building places and putting places that are specially designated with special filters and special air handling systems, and no, we don't need to do that. I think we need to be much more common sense, but I think it's certainly worth some conversation.
Okay. We'll bring something, we'll have that discussion and bring something back that's a little more precise. Was there anything else before we moved on?
No, go ahead and move on.
Okay.
Councilmember Gibbon had a question.
Oh, sorry.
No,
She was
no,
raising her
I mean,
hand.
I'm just very confused. Do we have a big smoking problem? Like, have we even had an issue with it? Anything? No?
Your Honor, not in,
I mean, realistically, you can't tell somebody they can't, I mean, I think we're all grown adults, and if they want to work for the city of Riverton, I think it's a matter of, like, if they're outside, not hurting anybody but themselves, like, get after it. I mean, I think that it comes down, I mean, when you look on the state law of smoking at the workplace, it literally comes down to, it says limit smoking to designated areas in the workplace. You can do that. Prohibit smoking at all workplaces, or prohibit smoking in certain areas of the workplace, such as hospitals and restaurants, which are totally understandable. But it also goes on to say that under the laws, smoking is prohibited in outdoor, but you have to be able to allow them certain distance from a workplace entrance is all. For example, they can't do it within 20 feet of like a front door of City Hall or something. But you can't take somebody's right away like that. And plus, I don't think it's that big of an issue. I mean, I think it comes down to if they're smoking in a vehicle, you reprimand them. If they come in and they smoke in a building, reprimand them. Otherwise, use common sense, and I think most smokers are already, I mean, if they're,
Policy is not written for comments.
well, and I get that, but I don't think that it should be, you get to tell somebody what to do. I mean, you're gonna lose, it's not they're not, the people that are smoking, they're already gonna figure out ways, I mean, they're gonna do it no matter what, or they're not gonna be working here, and then you're gonna be losing valuable employees, which I don't personally wanna do. I mean, if that's the worst thing that they're gonna do is smoke a cigarette, more power to them. If they're not hurting anybody, get after it.
Without getting way out in the weeds, it can be an issue. And so I think there needs to be a reasonable policy set so that the supervisors have a guideline to go by in case you have somebody that's abusing it. And that's what we're talking about, is there occasionally can be people that abuse the issue, and every time you go look for them, they're out smoking, not working.
Well, but then that's
I'm
a
not saying
reprimand.
everybody does that,
because
I'm
of
just
what they're
saying
choosing
it
to
can
do.
be a problem. And the supervisor needs a way to approach that as a disciplinary item, and so without a distinct policy, they don't have anything to use to do that.
I just think taking it away completely or trying to
Not what we're
dictate,
saying.
It needs to be.
I think it's gonna be a lot harder to dictate. I think if you can just keep it very simple, keep it easy. I would not put tons of verbiage into it. That's all.
Okay, next item.
Your Honor, moving past leave benefits, 8.03 is where we're at right now. That's page 64 to 68. One of the conversations that happened originally, and that I would draw attention to, was discussion about per diem, about travel policy, about how meals are paid. One of the ways that we're suggesting council consider this is to look at the U.S. General Services Administration per diem policy, keeping in mind, it's not just, while it says per diem, I want to be very clear here, we're not just saying, here's whatever the per diem is, have at it. It's a reimbursable amount, but the amount, instead of being stagnant, is set based on that third-party designation. So if you go to Memphis for a training, or if you go to Denver, or if you go, those are different. Those markets require different per day amounts. So what we're proposing here is more looking towards that instead of having the stagnant policy. It would still be a reimbursable amount, and it would still, you would still have to bring the receipts. So there would still be an accountability, but we wanted to just provide a more useful tool in our travel and training. So that's the main change within that section. I figured it would be something that everybody would want to, we would need to draw attention to it. It's something new. It's not something new for everybody. It's something new for us. So trying to get this in as we look at the other policies from other communities, this is something that was a possibility. I will tell you, having used this particular type of policy, it is useful. It does provide a little bit more paperwork because you have to say, here's the amount, here it's, okay, it's authorized, yes, we all understand. And then if you go over that, that's on you. One of the ones that has oddly come up is that there is a question about tipping. Here we write it in as may include a tip up to 15% if applicable. That is a conversation that usually comes up. I don't want to sidestep it. I just want to, it's there. But those are the main changes to that particular section, as it's just been something that's come up, and I think there was some good clarity added, but we'll look forward to any comments anybody has on it.
Just to clarify, does the GSA rate tell specifically based on just the cities? Like breakfast is this amount, lunch is, so it's still a per diem rate per meal, or is it straight? Because you're not talking straight receipts. You're still talking a per diem of an amount per meal.
a max.
A max.
We are talking about a max. The conversation about whether or not we want to just do an overall max for the day based on the meals that are allowed to you, so you can say, okay, I'm going to spend $5 on lunch and I can spend an extra $5 on dinner. To be honest, I don't generally have an issue with that, except I think I'm trying to find the spot, I'm sorry. I guess in short, I usually don't have too much of a challenge with that. It hasn't ever really come to the point. If somebody wants to pay for their own breakfast or own lunch and have a better dinner, that hasn't been a big deal. It's one of the perks of traveling. I haven't found also in personal experience that it has driven cost in a particular line item either.
I guess I'm just still confused because it's actual meal costs. So we're requiring a receipt that shows actual meal cost.
Yes.
Versus a per diem rate, which is just a maximum amount based on the meal that you're requesting for. So there's two different, I'm hearing two different things. Do you see how I?
Okay, and what I am trying to say is that the per diem is how much you can spend in a given day. That's how much you can spend on the meals, Your Honor.
And that's based on the city that you're in. So if you're traveling to Washington DC, the amount per day would be different than if you're traveling to Cheyenne, is what we're going to, correct?
Yes,
So it's per diem amount up to a maximum based on the
location.
location, still
Right.
requiring receipts to prove what the,
Right.
what the costs have been up to that
So
maximum.
if you
Yes.
want to not eat
Got it.
breakfast and lunch and go to Ruth Chris at night for a
Yep.
steak, that's fine.
Got it.
You still only get X dollars per day.
Got it.
So if it's a $100 steak and you only get $50, you're still going to get reimbursed $50.
Right.
Correct. Of course, this policy denotes no alcohol. That's pretty standard. Nothing of that change. The other item that is notable in here that I would just draw attention to is that if we go to Wham, so I go to Wham and all but one of my meals are provided, the only amount of money that I can ask for reimbursement for is that one meal. If this policy denotes that if you say, okay, they're serving lunch and I don't want that, I want to go get Qdoba, you're paying for Qdoba
Yeah, you can.
because it's already been provided if the city is already providing the training. So those are the highlights of of that particular policy.
Yep.
Moving on to the last one, section 9.00 is 70 to 71, deals with separation from employment, adds language for written resignation, who do you report to, who does it provided to, just a little bit of clarification, not a significant amount of addition, but just some clarification and some cleanup. At this point, these are all the changes that we have proposed. Those are the highlights of the changes that we have proposed. I would be happy to field any more questions or take any additional comments. At this point, what we'll do is take all the comments that we have received tonight, I've written them all down, and we will bring back better language, more clear language, just additional information to make sure that things read appropriately. We've looked at these documents enough that, just like anything else, we need other people's eyes on them. So we appreciate the assistance tonight and taking the time. It's not the most exciting item, but I will tell you it's probably the one that gets used the most.
One quick note.
Tim?
When I was looking for information regarding termination of employment, as in being fired, it's just
Separation. Come on.
involuntary separation, let's put it that way.
Oh, transfer.
It would be nice, when, it makes sense, I think, to have everything separated out like it does, but, the section that deals completely with, which one is it? Is it 6 that completely deals with, or is it 5? 5 is the disciplinary actions. I think it would be valuable because we do have 5 that's specifically about disciplinary actions, and then 9 talks about separation. It might be good to make reference in 9.25 and say, just have a section there that says like This is the problem with having only my phone with me. It is so hard. So separation of employment, we have resignation, layoff, effective date, return of city property, compensation, nothing about if you're involuntarily terminated. And it might make sense to have a section there that just says for involuntary termination, firing, separation, whatever we want to call it, see section 5. Just so it kind of makes it easier for us to be able to, oh, okay. Because it literally took me about 10 minutes of sitting here looking through it to find it. Now, mind you, I got distracted along the way because that happens. But it did take me a while to figure out, oh yeah, 5 is where we go for the termination. So just as a thought, it's neither here nor there. It doesn't even need to be addressed, but just an idea.
Separation.
Okay. We have those notes. Again, we would only simply ask that if there's anything else that comes up, any additional thoughts, please feel free to contact myself or Kristen so we can consider those. You might run across it at some point because I know it's real thrilling reading. So thank you.
All right, next item on the agenda is the WAM voting delegations. City Administrator's report.
Thank you, Your Honor. The WAM Summer Conference is coming up. It's going to be in Pinedale this year. The WAM Summer Conference business meeting is scheduled to be held Thursday, June 14th, and as we usually do, we need a voting delegate and a alternate. I would any elected official or staff may be designated by the city or town and its official voting as their official voting delegate. These need to be completed and faxed back in by May 11th. However, if for some reason something happens where an individual cannot attend, something comes up, anything could happen, we can say 2 people, both the alternate and the designee can't be there for some reason, that we have till June 13th before noon to actually walk them in a change. So we would ask you to set one tonight and as your designee and as the alternate, and then if something comes up, we'll deal with that. I understand it's a little ways off, but I would also point out that Mayor Baker is not here, and he did express interest in being the delegate this year, and I told him I would pass that along. So at this point, we would simply ask for a nomination for delegate, for the voting delegate and the alternate, or recommendations.
Okay. And what was the date again?
The date is Thursday, June 14th is the business meeting.
Okay. And who do we have there going?
Me.
Holly and, okay,
And I believe Mayor Baker. Mayor Baker. It sounds like.
okay.
I would nominate Mayor Baker as the voting delegate and Holly Gibbon as the alternate.
Second.
Do you accept the nomination?
Yeah.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Yes.
Okay.
How do you feel about that? Did you want to be the
No, we're good.
delegate?
No, we're good.
Okay.
Do we have any other business before us?
Your Honor, I have one item I would just point out. We have the planned budget meeting is tomorrow. Tomorrow afternoon, I believe it's right at 2 o'clock. We are getting towards the end of our process this year. We appreciate the assistance, but we would ask that council consider one additional afternoon session, possibly on the 23rd, that you are going to get your packets no later than June 15th. As such, we wanted to make sure that we have all of the input that we can get during that time period. So when we hand it to you, we've discussed it. You know exactly what the different changes have been. The budget documents that we hand out, while they have a ton of information in them, don't really discuss the choices that some of those things make. In order to provide that level of information in written form would take us a significant amount of time. So we want to make sure everybody has it as much as we can verbally, and that all the questions have been answered as much as we can. If everybody is available on, or if we would like to have it on the 23rd, if that works for most people.
Works for me.
Again, I'm going to be out of town that week.
I won't be here either.
I guess I would like you to send the information to me so and I can give you some comments, I guess, at least.
Are you thinking 2 o'clock on that day?
Yes, sir. I think we would keep it at the same time for consistency's sake.
Right. Yeah, the week after, when I know there was some discussion about the 29th or the 30th, I think, and that I could not do that, but I can do the 23rd.
If at that time we feel that we need another session just to go over it at any time, just to make sure we cover everything, we can make that happen. The reason we didn't push initially till the 30th is we wanted the time to take into account any changes that were denoted during that work, during those informational sessions. So,
Mike, are you gone that good portion that week or all week?
Yeah, I've got to be up in Powell for a project. And again, as those projects go, if I have the ability to get back, I will do my best to do that, so.
I doubt I'd be around on the 23rd.
Okay.
is there a better day that works for everyone that we might, or do we just want to do the 23rd and
Not that week for me.
not that week for you?
And the week after is terrible for me.
In that case, may I suggest we move on the 23rd, and then if we need to add, we can add.
That we're hosting.
And I'll do my best to move things around. I won't know until the 22nd whether I'll be able to do that, but that's, you know,
Okay. We have nothing else. Thank you very much.
okay.
I move we adjourned.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We're adjourned. 8:15.